The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great. Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, let the record show that for the first time in God knows how long, we started the show right at 10 o'clock.
It's big time.
Now, technically, when Reed's in this chair, the show starts directly
That's true.
at 10 o'clock. But do you believe in miracles? A miracle just happened. Kind of. Casey, good morning. How are you? Welcome in.
Good morning. Good morning. We're here on time, but no one's here. And that's why we don't start until 10:05.
Oh. Shots fired.
There you go, Casey.
I'm sorry. I just had to say it. No one gets in here until 10:05.
There we go.
That's why we don't start until 10:05.
That's why. That's the exact reason why. Yeah.
Mr. Rearing, good morning. I heard you had a tough night with the old sports betting last night.
Yeah. For those of you who stayed up for the 10:40 game last night, it was Arizona at home taking on Iowa State, third-ranked team in the nation. They were up by 3. My Iowa State Cyclones. They were up. Cyclones?
Yeah.
Up by 3.
Good job.
With 2 seconds left. Caleb Love, how about a 60-footer to send it to overtime and crush all my dreams? That was brutal. Brutal. But other than that, I'm fine.
I know you'll get to it in updates, but who came out on top in overtime, by the way?
We'll get it to it.
Ooh, a cliffhanger. I
Look
like
at
it.
that.
I'm on the edge of my seat. Jacob, good morning. How are we?
I'm good. Good to be here always. Everyone in the studio. Vibes are high.
We were talking before the show that we need some drama. Not in the studio. I think we've had enough of that in recent weeks. But we
need
the
helmet again.
We need they didn't get banged up. That's a strong helmet right there. That's a strong headpiece right there. So there's not a whole lot. There's no drama. The Bengals are quiet. They just introduced Al Golden yesterday. We'll get to that later. But it's kind of quiet. The Reds, they're kind of quiet. We'll get to some Reds stuff. We're missing something with this Reds team. We're missing.
I guess they're not quiet.
I guess
we keep saying the Reds had a quiet offseason or are having a quiet offseason. I guess not.
The Reds might be good.
Yeah.
The Reds might just F around and win this thing. I have no clue what's going on, but we'll get to that in a moment. Jason Fitz going to hang out with us. We'll talk, of course, about the Super Bowl rematch. Eagles, Chiefs. His team, the Raiders, introduced Pete Carroll yesterday. Pete Carroll looked good. He looked like he aged backwards for a few years.
Did you see the clip of their new GM, John Spytek, talking about his high school coach, one of the guys that really influenced him, is still coaching at 75, and how crazy that is, and how much of of an encouragement that is to him to keep working so hard. And Pete Carroll was just sitting there. He's like, "What are you talking about? 73."
Well, then also in that press conference, he goes, well, keep in mind, he goes, the last couple stops I've had, it takes a few years. And I'm thinking, do you have a few years? You kind of,
oh, no.
You need to. But he's a young 73, so he's good. He has a few years to get it going. But we'll talk about that too with Raiders fan Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports, coming up in a little bit. But let's send it over to our guy. We got the show started on time. Great vibes here in the studio today. Smile on Elliot's face. Difference between a smile and a smirk, of course. But let's send it to our guy, Elliot, for Elliot's headlines.
Score updates, breaking news, local and national headlines. Whatever's going on in the world of sports, Elliot has you covered. Off the Bench brings you Elliot's headlines.
It just didn't feel right.
Didn't feel right. One day it's going to feel right, though.
One day
it's
we
going to feel
couldn't start
right.
at 10 o'clock and have the whistle.
No.
Not a ton of headlines, if I'm going to be honest. It was kind of a slow day, but we'll go over some of it. As I mentioned, Arizona upset Iowa State, the third-ranked team in the country, 86-75, outscored them 15-4 in overtime after the miracle shot by Caleb Love. Again, unfortunate for those who had Iowa State and felt very good with 2.0 seconds left in that game. UCLA and Mick Cronin, they survive against USC 82-76. Two-seeded Duke, they take care of NC State 74-64. But it was kind of some weird circumstances in that game. I don't know if anybody paid attention. Multiple delays due to, I forget which player it was, violently puking on the court. Had to take a delay.
Little Hunter Green action. Huh?
The little Hunter Green action. And then a few minutes later, a fan had to be escorted out and not really carried out. Yeah. I believe she fainted or passed out in the student section. Had to walk her off the court. They carried her out, and game had to be delayed again. So some very weird circumstances at Old Duke yesterday. NBA news. Amen Thompson hits a buzzer beater to give the Rockets a 114-112 victory over the Celtics. The Magic, they lost to the Heat 125-119 in double overtime. Jimmy Butler has been suspended for a third time this season after walking out of a shoot-around. He is suspended indefinitely. I think he's going to be traded eventually.
They have to trade.
He's going to be traded eventually, right?
You can't just not trade a guy, deny a guy's trade request, and then suspend him indefinitely.
Yeah.
I feel like you got to just move him.
You got to
see,
you got to just trade him.
When you're Pat Riley, though, who has quite a few rings, he's accomplished it all. It's kind of nice watching an organization not let the athlete win for once.
That's true.
And I'm not anti-Jimmy Butler in this situation, but at the same time, it's that the athletes are so used to controlling absolutely everything, and Pat Riley has he let LeBron James just go. He was thinking to let LeBron James get his way, and Jimmy Butler's in here trying to throw his weight around, who has not won a ring. I see people talking about Jimmy Butler getting his jersey retired in Miami, having a statue put up, and I'm like, statues go up for people who win championships. I'm not anti-Jimmy Butler, but I think putting him in the category with some of these greats is just kind of insane to me. D. Wade, obviously Haslam, LeBron James. You look at Alonzo Mourning, Shaquille O'Neal technically won a title there, obviously too. How you could put Jimmy Butler in those conversations is just beyond me. Just trade him though, because it's becoming a distraction. They would rather lose than use him to acquire pieces to help them contend in the East. It's the weirdest thing.
Very, very weird. The Cleveland Cavaliers, they beat the Pistons 110-91. Garland and Mitchell combined for 43 points, 13 assists, 7 boards. NHL news, not a ton. Red Wings, they beat the Kings 5-2. Flyers, they win 4-2 over the Devils at home. Those are pretty much your sports headlines, unless I'm missing something.
Nothing major, but the Senior Bowl opt-outs have come, and a couple names that are pertinent to the Bengals. Over 30 opt-outs of the Senior Bowl, guys that initially said they were going to go, and that's just kind of a unplanned effect of the longer college football season. All the guys that went and played 15, 16 games, they're not going to go play another game in a week in Mobile, Alabama. But Xavier Watts, Lathan Ransom, some of the top safeties in the class that I know personally I was excited to watch for the Bengals. Nick Scorton, an edge rusher from A&M that we've talked about potentially being a first-round pick for the Bengals. And then Tate Ratledge as well, the guard from Georgia. A couple names that we've thrown around for the Bengals in the draft that aren't going to be at the Senior Bowl. Would have been a great chance to watch some of those guys, but like I said earlier, over 30 guys have opted out of the Senior Bowl. So I think this is something they're going to look at in the future, try to move some stuff around to make sure more of these guys can play, because this is such a big part in the scouting process.
Yeah, with the scouting process too, you also have you look at Shador, who said he let it be known he may not throw at the combine.
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you, by the way, I know as we get closer to that, I wouldn't throw at the combine. The combine is not to look for reasons to draft you. They are looking for reasons not to draft you. I would not. If you're Shador, I wouldn't compete in that either. I wouldn't take part in that either. I know that sounds wild, but they're not looking to be impressed with you. They're looking for a reason to move you down that board. And that's usually most of this draft analysis to begin with, is they're not looking for reasons that they like you. They just want to find something that they can justify not taking you.
For sure.
So if they don't select you and you go on to be a star somewhere else, remember, he had small hands, all that fun stuff, all the random stuff that they come up with. That's worked out pretty well for Burrow and his small hands, right? But Shador saying he's not going to throw. It'll be controversial because it's Shador, but I don't think it's controversial at all. I would not throw at the combine. I just wouldn't.
No, everyone killed Marvin Harrison Jr. last year for not doing any of the combine stuff, and he still got drafted 4th. So I think if you put out multiple years of good film in college, the benefits greatly decrease of running routes or running a 40 in shorts and a T-shirt in Indianapolis. If you have 2-3 years of elite film in college, there's no reason to do that and hurt your draft stock. But speaking of the small hands, a borderline first-round quarterback, much talked about Jalen Milroe, was measured yesterday at the Senior Bowl, and he has the smallest hands of any draft-eligible quarterback since Taysom Hill.
Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah. So not great for Jalen Milroe.
How small were Bryce Young's hands?
Bigger than 9 inches.
Oh.
And do not disrespect a fringe first-rounder. You mean the number 2 overall pick?
I was going to say, he might be going to Cleveland.
If you listen to Sports Talk in Cleveland, it might happen.
He was there.
He was there. His plane was there. Then it wasn't.
His plane, he doesn't have a plane.
I would cheer for him in Cleveland.
I feel like you would cheer for a lot of people in Cleveland, except for there's one in particular person.
Yeah,
but,
and I think I'm pretty justified on that end.
No arguments here. There's been a lot of arguments here. None
I think there were some arguments.
What if they bought Big Ben out of retirement? to take over.
Yeah, I'd be out on him too.
Okay.
I'd be out on him too.
Fair enough.
Bad guy.
But no, Shador.
Allegedly.
The problem with quarterbacks saying,
so.
I don't want to throw at the combine.
Huh?
Problem with quarterbacks saying they don't want to throw at the combine. Shador or anybody, technically.
Yeah. I will go if Shador is drafted to Cleveland. I would have the under on any success Shador would have in Cleveland. I think there was
That wasn't the question.
That wasn't the question.
no.
And you wonder why we get, no, but keep going.
No, but I expect a trade request to happen within a year. I don't care if they throw in the combine.
Fair enough. Off the bench presented by United Dairy
You've
Farmers.
seen enough tape.
We'll get into this with Jason Fitz coming up here in a moment. Yesterday we did the which quarterback do we feel is least likely to win a Super Bowl between Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow. We discussed that yesterday. You threw one out that we'll talk to Fitzy about too. Which one of those three quarterbacks is the most likely to not finish his career with his particular team right now? I know we only have a couple minutes, but is there a QB that you think is the least likely to finish their career? I mean, you could say all of them. Technically, these greats don't finish their career.
If I had to bet on it right now, I would bet that all three of those guys win a Super Bowl in their career and all three of those guys retire with their team. I think if you had to put a money on it right now, odds on it right now, what do they have, a decade left each, hypothetically?
Yeah.
You think they'd get one. I mean, Mahomes can't keep going back and back and back, but
what if he does?
I guess hypothetically he could.
But what if he does?
I don't know. I think the easy answer for that is obviously the Bengals, because who knows what happens with this organization at the time of Joe Burrow's contract ending and whether or not they'd be willing to extend him again and do a sort of rebuild type thing with big money on a quarterback. I don't know. I think Baltimore and Lamar are pretty set after what they went through last time. I don't think he's really going anywhere. And I think the other question is really the same with Josh, because the Bills aren't that far from the Bengals in terms of organizations and how they're run. So kind of a similar question there when he's up. If they're not in a great spot, would they extend Josh or try to move on from him? I think the Bengals and the Bills are very similar with where they're at with both quarterbacks. I know the Bengals have elite weapons, but the Bills have an elite offensive line and some studs on defense. So I think there's a lot of similarities organizationally between those two.
Yeah, and keep in mind, of those three, though, there's only one QB that has tried to get out.
Yeah.
That was Lamar.
That's true.
that is Lamar at the end of the day. By the way, Bills, McDermott, is he their head coach next year?
Yeah. He has to be. Who are you hiring?
I just think he's had too much success. Success is measured differently once you have certain expectations. But I feel like getting to a couple AFC championship games, making the playoffs every year, I feel like it's about as good as you can do before you look elsewhere and you're taking a risk on, can this guy do better than what McDermott's doing? I don't know. I think you would have to keep him. And the second they miss the playoffs, like if they were to miss the playoffs this year, then you would have said, all right, let's let him go. But you got to an AFC championship game. I mean, the mountaintop, you got as high about as high as you can possibly get. So I would venture to say that McDermott's sticking around until something disastrous occurs.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that decision is made much easier if this is like the last time they played the Chiefs in Arrowhead and they score and it's 40 points and they lose on a last second thing and you fire McDermott and you promote Joe Brady because the offense looked so good. He was getting interviews everywhere else. I think that's something that could have come into play. But since the offense was so abysmal with situational play calling, short yardage and everything like that, I don't think you even consider promoting Joe Brady. And I wouldn't go outside the building. You've had so much success with what you have there. I know you haven't gotten to a Super Bowl, but you've been as close as anyone. So I think you got to keep him.
Yeah, wouldn't that be wild? You head coach leads his team to the AFC Championship game, you fire him.
Yeah.
Zach Taylor misses the playoffs 2 straight years.
Yeah,
they're trying to figure out how to not lose in September.
That would be crazy.
Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports. We'll talk Super Bowl. We'll talk college football. We'll talk it all. He'll join us next. Welcome back to Off the Bench. Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. Casey McAllister in the producer chair. And Casey, of course, has our next guest all set up for us. Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports. Jason, welcome in. Another Tuesday, another visit from you. We always appreciate your time. Super Bowl, Eagles, Chiefs. I mean, we got to stop betting against the Chiefs, right? I mean, every time I bet on the Bills. I thought we were going to have Josh Allen, finally get over that hump. It didn't happen, but as our guy Elliot said yesterday, we just got to learn. Just stop betting against the Chiefs. It's not going to end well for you.
Yeah, it won't. And look, I'll credit Trey Wingo with the stat I just saw this morning that sort of blew my mind, but it encapsulates everything. In NFL playoffs, there have been 140 times that a team got the ball back with under 2 minutes to go in a one-score game. 40% of the time, they're able to turn that into the points that they need. All right, so for general rule, Trey pointed this out. Tom Brady 11 times got the ball in the closing minutes of the game, needing a score in his playoff career. 5 of the 11 times they got the points, they went on. That's sort of, a little above average. Drew Brees was 3 of 6, so 50%. That's much better than average. Patrick Mahomes in his career in the playoffs has gotten the ball 7 times down by a score and needing points. He has gotten those points all 7 times. It's 100% of the time. So this is really simple. In a one-score game, you will not beat the Kansas City Chiefs. So your only shot at beating Kansas City is to blow them out. And guess what? Nobody blows out Kansas City. It doesn't matter. The Bills looked like they had the right game plan in a lot of ways, and I think they were the better team in a lot of ways. I think the Eagles are the better team. Doesn't really matter because you don't blow the Chiefs out. The Chiefs will keep it to a one-score game. And by the way, 7 times in a one-score game where Mahomes has needed the points, he's gotten the points. 7 of 7 is mind-blowing. You don't beat this team.
We'll dive into the Eagles-Chiefs matchup more in a moment. Josh Allen, obviously, every time you lose in the playoffs, there's always some legacy storyline that follows with it. You either make, your legacy either, improves or it takes a hit. Did Josh Allen's legacy take a hit with another loss against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs? How do we evaluate Josh Allen moving forward, who had a great season, an MVP caliber season, might be the MVP, we don't know, but how do you evaluate Josh Allen now after being knocked out of the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs?
I think the problem is we become so championship obsessed as a society that we assume the only way you can be great is to be a champion, and that's just not true in a team sport. This isn't boxing, this isn't golf, this isn't one on anything. This is 53 on 53. And the problem here is that, we have to go back in the past and look at guys like Marino. Marino never won a Super Bowl. Does that mean Dan Marino wasn't surely a Hall of Famer? I imagine if Twitter existed during the Buffalo Bills era of losing 4 straight Super Bowls and the way we would react. The real answer to this question, and I think the NBA comp everybody's using is a smart one, all right? Do you sit here and say that Patrick Ewing sucked or that Charles Barkley was trash because they couldn't beat Jordan? I genuinely believe we are seeing the most dominant quarterback when it comes to making clutch plays that we will ever see or have ever seen in our lives. So the best coach of all time at this point with the best quarterback, I think, of all time by the time it's said and done, also the best defensive coordinator in the league, and maybe one of the 2 or 3 best of all time are on the same team at the same time. And guess what, guys? They're young enough. They can keep doing this for the next 10 years if they want to. So the reality of it is great players aren't going to win Super Bowls. So, what do we want? I mean, at some point, Josh Allen, could he have thrown better in the first couple of drives? He looked a little tight. I think that's fair. Is it Josh Allen's fault they can't get a tush push? We watched the Eagles do that over and over and over again. Bills couldn't do any of that in a clear way. Are we really going to put that on Josh Allen? Are we really going to put that on? At some point, you are just taking on a juggernaut. So I think the real answer to this is that we need to crumble up, throw away the legacy conversation for the next decade. Y'all, I don't think there's anything that stops Kansas City from winning 5, 6, 7, 8 of the next 10 championships. This could end up being historic in a way that we've simply never even tried to process. The only shot that Lamar and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow, frankly, are going to consistently have at a Super Bowl is a year where there's a freak injury or something, maybe somebody retires and we don't expect that, or by God, somebody finally makes the miracle happen and by some way the Chiefs are knocked out and then everybody's going to be standing there. And the problem is that might happen once or twice in the next 7 or 8 years, but which of these 4 or 5 Hall of Fame caliber quarterbacks are going to get the ring out of it. So I think the real answer to this is we just got to stop expecting championships to be part of the legacy and instead looking at the full body of work. Josh Allen is one of the best players in the NFL, clearly, and looks like he's on track to get a gold jacket someday. And that's not going to change based on the fact that Mahomes and the Chiefs are beating the Bills towards the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that kind of ties in. We talked about this on yesterday's show. We said, you look at Lamar Jackson, you look at Joe Burrow, you look at Josh Allen. I think with, you put those three with Patrick Mahomes, obviously the top 4 quarterbacks in the league, no particular order. We've seen Joe Burrow, the only one be able to knock off Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship game at this point out of the AFC. But when you look at Joe Burrow, you look at Lamar Jackson, you look at Josh Allen, of those three, you lay them out right now. I mean, of those three, which one is more most likely to not win a Super Bowl throughout their career? That's something we broke down yesterday and kind of gave our thoughts on that. Of those three, which of those is most likely to never win a Super Bowl when their careers are all said and done?
Yeah, okay. So if I'm taking the 3 that's not going to get there, I go Joe Burrow, but it's not because of Joe Burrow. I think if you're taking those 3 quarterbacks, like today, if I was starting a franchise with Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, or Joe Burrow, and I could go in and I could build whatever franchise I want, I would probably take Joe Burrow as my number 1 guy. I love Joe Burrow, the quarterback, but now we're talking about which one's not going to get a Super Bowl. All right, well, which organization do I trust the most? I certainly trust the Ravens to be able to continue to be in proximity. They've proven that they always can be. And frankly, I think the Bills have proven that even when their talent dips, they can still turn around and be a force in the AFC Championship, right? Like, who was their offensive weapon other than Josh Allen that we were scared of, and they still put themselves in this situation? There are holes on that roster, and they still put themselves in this situation. So they get benefit of the doubt. In order to win the Super Bowl, not only do you have to be in the right place at the right time in a year where I think, frankly, Mahomes somehow, God forbid, gets injured. That's maybe the only path to it. Your team has got to be really good, top to bottom, all the way around. Do we trust the Bengals to consistently spend the money that they need to continue to evaluate talent the way they need to build a juggernaut of a team that's always in the conversation for the top 3 in the AFC? Because frankly, for me, I'm looking at the Ravens and the Bills and saying, hey, if there's anything we know, next year the Ravens and the Bills are both going to be great football teams. There is no drop-off for those organizations. We just watched Burrow have an absolutely extraordinary year on a trash team. So I think the Bengals put Joe Burrow in the worst situation, so that means Burrow's the answer to it.
Yeah, yesterday everyone was expecting me to pick Burrow because I'm the Bengals hater in the eyes of most. I went with Lamar for this reason. When Josh Allen and Joe Burrow are in the playoffs, we never question which Joe Burrow is going to show up. We don't question which Josh Allen is going to show up. Those two have always been great in the playoffs. Like, you look at the playoff numbers for Josh Allen, fantastic. Joe Burrow, I mean, obviously the lights are never too bright for him. It's not a shot at Lamar. Lamar is a fantastic player, 2-time MVP, might be a 3-time MVP. But you do question at times in the playoffs which Lamar is going to show up, because the Lamar that shows up in the playoffs more times than not is not the Lamar that shows up during the regular season. So I leaned in that direction a little more. But obviously, going back to your point, it's Super Bowls are a team success standpoint, not just individually.
Yeah, and I hear you on the Lamar thing. I think he canceled some of that conversation this year. I do think he was good enough to get credit. And the Ravens roster, you think about where the Ravens were at the beginning of the year. New defensive coordinator, new defensive scheme. They were getting just killed on the defensive side of the ball. They cleaned a lot of that up by the back half of the year. Their offensive line throughout the course of the year got much better. I think sometimes when we look at coaching, you just look at those improvements throughout the course of the year. I don't think the Ravens lost this year because they couldn't get out of their way. I think the Ravens lost this year because they're in the same conference as the Bills and the Chiefs. The loss was inevitable. So, for me, I hear where you're coming from on Lamar, but I think he's fixed some of that. And I'll be really interested to see what the Ravens do moving forward, because as good as Zay Flowers, and I think Zay Flowers being in would have made a big difference too, but as good as Zay Flowers is, I still think that much like the Bills, the Ravens are one clutch, oh my God, wide receiver away from just absolutely being a nightmare to defend. So I still trust the organization, but I hear you on Lamar being up and down.
We give college football a hard time, I think, for being, the top-heavy sport. Usually we know who those top 4 teams are going to be, who's going to be in contention for a national championship. I think the NFL has escaped that narrative for a while until right about now. I think once the Chiefs started taking over here, and I know it was there when Tom Brady was here too. I just think it's emphasized once you see what's happened over the last 6 years. 4 unique or 4 different, I guess, Super Bowl matchups. Mahomes has been involved in 5 of the 6. Is there a top-heavy problem in the NFL?
No, only because it's always been there. Not only, and this is why I keep yelling this week, but I think we just forget, because you're right. What I don't know is how the NFL has managed criticism for this, but the fact is, before the Chiefs, it was the Patriots, and the Patriots were really long. So we forget that before the Patriots, the Cowboys were that in the 90s, and before that, the 49ers were that in the 80s, and before that, the Steelers were that in the 70s, and before that, the Packers were that in the 60s, right? Just keep looking at every area. When the Super Bowl first came around, it was just win after win after win for the Packers in that era. The Packers and the Browns all the way back. So every decade has a team that just steps up and crushes everybody. And I think it's interesting because we trash the NBA for that a lot, where it's it's always a dynasty in the NBA. Well, I guess the NFL is sort of hold my beer to that. I just remember the Montana 49ers that just nobody could stop the Montana 49ers. And then it was the Steve Young 49ers on top of that. Those Bills teams went to 4 straight Super Bowls, and they were taking on the Cowboys, where it was 2 of those 4 Super Bowl losses were the same Dallas Cowboys team, basically. So I think dominance at the top has really been the theme. Where the NFL wins is that parity exists in so much of the playoffs. But once we get to the Super Bowl, I think the Super Bowl matchups are more predictable than not, more often than not. And we should pay more attention to that.
I don't want to talk about the refs. I really don't want to, but I think I have to for a little bit. Just a little bit, I want to talk about the refs. I think that every fan of every team is going to have a biased reaction when it comes to officiating. It's never going to change no matter what you do. But is there something we can do to maybe ease the mind of NFL fans when it comes to some of these games? I saw you were tweeting about potentially, putting microphones on refs so we can at least hear what's going on. I don't understand how, you can bring out chains and measure the football sometimes, and then we don't see it other times. I don't see how some of the rules are lacking consistency. We're throwing out a rule from 1940, the Palpably Unfair Act, or whatever that nonsense is. I just feel like there has to be something to ease our minds a little bit, right? Is there anything they could do?
Yeah, I think the XFL really taught everybody the best approach here. The XFL had the review booth. They had Dean Blandino in the XFL review booth, and I covered the XFL for ESPN at the time. One of the most interesting things is Dean was mic'd up. So the minute it went to review, you heard everything. You heard Dean ask for the angles he was looking for, and you heard Dean work through the process. And I think it was one of the best things that they did in that because, frankly, you at least got an understanding. There were times I was looking at a play, and I'm like, oh, this is getting overturned for sure. And then by the end of hearing Dean, you're like, I might not agree with him, but I do understand where he's coming from. So I think that's step one, is at least letting us in on the review process. Step two, at some point, I think having an eye in the sky, like some sort of a sky ref that is looking at everything from a TV standpoint also makes a ton of sense, because one of the hard parts on this is we have so many angles on the TV side. Now, it's fair. I think Ryan McGee that works at ESPN, his dad was a longtime official. I did some spring officiating stuff with the SEC once, and it's fair when you start having these conversations about camera angles. Think about pictures. Anytime you take a picture of somebody and the angle matters, like some of these things, is the angle spot on? Is it overhead? Like, is the camera straight on it? Like, I understand that there's a lot that goes into it, but I think hearing from the refs would make a big difference. Also, I will say the spot of the ball one was tough for me. I thought he got the first down. The catch, the ball hit the ground. I mean, the ball's allowed to hit the ground as long as it didn't move. And to me, it didn't move. So just the other thing I'd say to everybody is if you're sitting in a living room with 10 people and you have a few different opinions in the room, just remind yourself that shows you that very little of this is clear cut. Like, it's just very little of it is as black and white as we want it to be. So you just have to remember that in the process.
I just don't get how there's technology. I'm a big tennis guy. How you can get the tennis ball on that line to the smallest fraction of a centimeter. You can get just the tiniest hair and you know if it's in or out. How in the NFL, the biggest sport in the country, is that not a possibility? I've never understood it, how they don't use, like you said, an eye in the sky type of situation where we know these things right away. Like, I think this year we dealt with a ton of face mask stuff. You know, Joe Burrow, a couple bad missed face masks. Sam Darnold, a couple bad missed face masks. That's something that can be reviewed immediately, and it just doesn't happen. That's why I want some sort of fix with the NFL officiating this offseason. I always ask for it. I'm never going to get it. But that's just at least what I would want.
Yeah, no, I think expedited review makes a lot of sense. And, you know, I love that Shefty pointed out that they're going to start looking at possibly, you know, quarterbacks ducking some of these contacts. And I think that's a great idea, too. The spot of the ball, I've asked around the league and haven't gotten an answer that I'm smart enough to understand. But the one thing I have been told repeatedly is that it's not as simple as just that because of the shape of the football and because of the way yards track and because of forward progress. And there are different variables that apparently make it more complicated than I'm smart enough to understand. I don't know why you can't just microchip every football. But then the question is, are you microchipping it at both ends? And, like, how does that Again, I'm not smart enough to understand why they haven't done that. They have their reasons they haven't done it, but it's like explaining calculus to me. So I don't know what it is, but I'm with you. I think you would think that the NFL would look at it and say, hey, what I don't want is two refs standing, 20 yards away from a play trying to decide suddenly where the ball goes within fractions of an inch. But also, what's it going to take for the NFL to make a change? I mean, they still get mocked for the note card game where they had to pass the little note card to see if it worked through the chain. And I'm like, that's the most accurate thing that we have is a note card from a number. So I think it's pretty wild that the NFL hasn't figured something out with all of their resources.
My last question for you, the tush push. The tush push. Illegal or illegal in the 2025 season?
Legal. And I don't think there's any way. A couple of things. To change a rule, it has to either be so egregious that everybody in the world is freaking out about it in a negative way, like when they've changed some of the pass interference things that they've looked at, or it has to impact a ton of the league. And one of the things that has been pointed out to me multiple times, like when you talk about collective bargaining, players don't freak out about the franchise tag because it only impacts 32 players out of the 2,000 some hundred players that are in the NFL. So they're not going to make a sweeping change for that. Well, same with the tush push. It impacts so little. What do you do about it? But the other side is for everyone that says the play should be illegal. I guess my question is, why are coaches in a copycat league not sitting down and trying to figure out how to do it? Like, exactly. The play will become illegal when 30 teams can run it that way, and it just is a cheat code that doesn't make any sense. Right now, if Buffalo could execute the tush push at all, they'd be headed to the Super Bowl. The number of times that they were stopped for 1 yard, not just the key play, but the number of times that the broadcast was pointing out when they know Josh is going to go to his left, and it just wasn't working. I don't understand why every team doesn't have somebody on their roster that's about Jalen Hurts' size that can squat a bunch of weight and say, okay, we're going to work on this all summer until we can execute it. Like, the Eagles have figured out how to run this play better than ever. The problem isn't the play. The problem is that the Eagles have executed it perfectly and nobody else can. So, frankly, I don't think that this is an issue where they need to turn it around. I think this is an issue as a Raiders fan. I'm sitting here saying, hey, Pete Carroll, spend all summer working on the tush push so we're also a 4-down team. Maybe if the whole league starts to do it, then it'll get changed. But they're not going to change one play because one team is doing it better than everybody.
Pete would throw it if they needed a yard. Pete would throw that.
Yeah, he will. Yeah, 100%. And be tricky with it.
All right, Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Step away for a brief second, and we'll wrap up our conversation with Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports. More Off the Bench next. Jacob's allowed to talk now.
I am. Welcome back in. Off the Bench, 1410 Wing AM, joined by Jason Fitz of Yahoo Sports. We're talking about the Super Bowl rematch between the Chiefs and the Eagles. And, Everyone's focused on the three-peat and what it means for Patrick Mahomes. Winning those 3 Super Bowls in a row, his 4th in his 7 years starting, where that would put him in the GOAT conversation and the all-time conversation. But I think everyone's brushing over what this championship would mean for Jalen Hurts and a lot of people on the Eagles. What would this mean for how Hurts is viewed in the NFL conversation? He'd become the 3rd quarterback in the history of football to win a national championship and a Super Bowl. How much would this mean for Philadelphia and the Eagles players?
I mean, think about Ryan Day. We talk college football here a lot, right? You guys know him better than most. And think about the way the conversation changed on Ryan Day after losing to Michigan. Now I'll ask everybody to go back and remember what the conversation was about Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni 2 months ago, right? Like, there were plenty of people sitting there saying Hurts is overpaid, he's not really that dude, and Sirianni's going to get fired. And just think about how much it's changed since then. And what's wild is that the Eagles have invested all of this money on 2 great wide receivers, and their passing game just doesn't look all that great. But does it matter? They had more rushing touchdowns in the NFC Championship game than the Cowboys had all season. So, like, that's a crazy stat. And what Jalen Hurts gives you, particularly, a part of the reason Saquon is because you also have to respect Jalen Hurts running in this process. So I think that we have to start to step back and say, hey, not everybody does it the same, but it doesn't mean that everybody – it doesn't mean that Jalen Hurts isn't a superstar. I think you have to look at his very unique skill set and the way that the Eagles have built around it. And, yeah, if they win the Super Bowl, if they manage to take down the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, then not only is this the tip of the cap moment, but it also sort of solidifies an Eagles organization that has been screaming, outside looking in, has been screaming about change for months, and now looks really smart that they didn't make any of those changes.
We talk about the studs on the Eagles all the time, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Carter. How much credit should be given to Howie Roseman with what he's been able to do throughout the various offseasons to build this super team, if you will?
Yeah, one of the best GMs in the league, but also really smart at doing the anti-Jerry Jones. What Howie Roseman does that's great is he gets ahead of contracts. So, look, I'll give you that contract, and if I got to figure out a way to get out of it, Carson Wentz, Nick Foles, those sorts of things, I'll figure out a way to get out of it, right? But I'm going to pay you now and get ahead of the market curve. That has worked repeatedly. So, yeah, they have a great eye for it. And also, Howie's done a really good job of figuring out if I invest early, then I'm going to be ahead of the market price of it. And then I have to continue to draft spectacularly well, which, by the way, they've done. I mean, that doesn't even mention Zach Braun coming in this year, what he's meant to this team. Like, the Eagles have had a absolutely Herculean offseason. Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, home run draft picks. So just look across the board at the job that they've done of maintaining their own by investing early and then finding the right way to get the right guys in for their defense all across the board. And we don't sit here and scream about the youth. No, we sit here and scream about their explosiveness. So I think Howie Roseman he's beyond a superstar at this point. He's an Avenger. Like, he's a superhero GM. He's a cheat code for the Eagles moving forward.
You talked about the corners they drafted, but not the only defenders they brought in this year. They hired Vic Fangio to be their defensive coordinator. Everyone's focused on Steve Spagnuolo, how great he is, and rightfully so. But these are probably the 2 best defensive coordinators in all of the NFL. How important is that role in getting to a Super Bowl throughout a long NFL season?
Yeah, I think the defensive coordinator spot on this is so key. Look at the couple of big plays for the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. One was obviously the offensive call to decide to throw the ball late. Everybody thought that was pretty interesting, pretty gutsy by Andy Reid. We expect that from Andy Reid. But also setting the blitz where they sent the blitz from that wasn't even capable of being picked up by Buffalo was a brilliant call by Spags. I'm really stunned, guys, that Spags isn't getting more head coaching consideration. He is now 20-4 in the playoffs as a defensive coordinator. Like, that's a stunning number. So, and let's remember that Spags was the defensive coordinator for the Giants team that knocked off the Patriots when no one thought that could happen, right? Like, this is what he does. So, Fangio has not particularly had success against Patrick Mahomes. Now, you start talking about the coaching process of this. Let's understand, we're giving Andy Reid a bye week. We know Andy Reid doesn't lose coming off a bye week. We're giving Spags a bye week. I think it's such a huge advantage. The coaches on the sidelines are such a huge advantage for both of these teams. And, it's also a reminder, like, Philly had really good coordinators. They went to a Super Bowl. They had bad coordinators. Sirianni was going to get fired. They got good coordinators again. They're back in the Super Bowl, right? Like, one of the keys for every team, and I don't care if we're talking about the Bengals, the Raiders, the Browns, teams that stink, man, you better get great coaches there to make the most of the talent you have. I think that's an undertold story for both Philly and Kansas City.
We speculated about it for a while in Cincinnati, but talking about defensive coordinators, the Bengals made it official with Al Golden. A lot of people are upset about the process they went through, not necessarily with the candidate, but a limited number of interviews. Seemed like they got their guy early in the process and didn't really cast a very wide net. What are your thoughts on Al Golden officially being in Cincinnati and the process the Bengals took? Is it important to interview a lot of guys if you already know who you're going to hire, or just focus on the guy you believe in?
No, look, I think Al Golden's going to be a great defensive coordinator, and he has been a great defensive coordinator. So, also, I don't think you can drag your feet and get somebody like Al Golden to come. The other part of it is, look, everybody wants the best defensive coordinator, right? Like that, we become obsessed with that. I think it's about the best fit. And I'll go back to my music days, right? Like if I was asked today to put together a band for an artist, and they're coming in and saying, "Hey, we want you to hire a band," I would do auditions, sure. And in the process of auditions, I would invite one or two guys that I have friends that I know can play, because I want to meet new people and see where they are. But 99 out of 100 times when I'm putting together a band, I'm going to hire a guitar player I know and trust, and he's going to be one of the best. There might be a better one out there, but I'm going to hire somebody I know because they know the way I want a band to run. And I just think we need to remember that coaching staffs are in part about being great coaches. I just mentioned that. It's at some point, too, it's about making sure you have the right great coach for your fit. There's no question that Al Golden's qualified, right? Like this isn't a reach of a hire. So now it really becomes about who is this coaching staff comfortable with? And, casting a wide net is something that fans talk about all the time. But I guess my question is, okay, you have to look at your personnel. You have to ask yourself, are you in win now, right now mode? Or you have to ask yourself, are you willing to do a rebuild on one side of the ball? Because that could take 2 off seasons to do. So if you're not willing to do a rebuild, which if I ran the Bengals, I wouldn't be. I've got Joe Burrow. I want to win Super Bowls right now, which means I need a defensive coordinator that's like a chef on Chopped. Opens a basket of ingredients and cooks with what he's got, right? So I need somebody that cooks with what I got. That changes some of the wide net that people want you to cast, because certainly if you go out and you look at Patrick Graham, who we also talked about, I think Patrick Graham is a home run defensive hire also, but he also has a very particular type of defense that takes a couple of years for guys to learn and wants particular types of players. So as an organization, if you don't want to get into that sort of a system where you're rebuilding on one side of the ball, even if you need new infusion of talent, do you really want to be teaching a new system to an entire new, like you looking for 8 new starters? Because that takes 2 off seasons. So I think the wide net thing is overspoken by a lot of people. When you actually put yourself in Zach Taylor's shoes, the question is, here's what we got. Who do we think can make the most of what we got that runs a system that I'm comfortable with? Those variables automatically take a bunch of candidates off the list.
The Bengals weren't the only ones that made a major hire. Your Raiders hired Pete Carroll to be their next head coach, and it seems to be a start of a rebuild in Las Vegas. Not a whole lot to hang on to talent-wise in that roster. Pete Carroll, at 73 years old, it'll definitely be nice to have someone who knows what they're doing, knows how the NFL works in that building. Seems like something they've been missing for a while. But does his age at the start of a rebuild hold any pause for you as they hire him to be their next head coach?
He is the 15th full-time, not interim, 15th full-time coach hired by the Raiders in the last 31 years. So if he only makes it 3 years, he's actually made it above the average for the Raiders, number one. Number two, I will just gently remind everybody, you mentioned we're going to talk politics. I'll gently remind everybody without taking a political side. The last 2 people that were elected to run the United States of America were older than Pete Carroll. If you can run the free world, you can probably run a football team. Do I love the age of Pete Carroll? Nah. Is that great for a 10-year build? Probably not. But frankly, at some point, you just need somebody to come in and stabilize the sinking ship. And the Raiders are a sinking ship. So I think some of this is just so overblown. And the other part of it is every single time you take the roll of dice on a new coordinator being your head coach, you're taking the roll of the dice that you're going to be hiring somebody new in 3 years. So in the world of who knows, at some point, you just need somebody that, like, you know what? I do know this. I know Pete Carroll can coach. I know Pete Carroll can implement a culture. I know that Pete Carroll can raise the floor of anything that he's part of. And wherever the Raiders are when he's done coaching is better off than they are today. So at some point, isn't that like I would implore Bengals fans to remember what it was like when you went through double-digit losses year in and year out and year in and year out. And at some point, you just want to get to respectable. Forget getting to Super Bowls. Bad teams just need to get to respectable and get somebody in the building that can do that. I think Pete Carroll will do that. I don't know if this is some great hire that suddenly changes the perspective of where the team's going to be in the next 10 years. But I know that I'm not going to be scared of Mondays and Tuesdays because I'm worried that Get Up and every other TV show are going to be making fun of my favorite football team for being run incompetently for the next couple of years.
Well, you think that's bad. How about being in fear of the show that you actually are one of the hosts on, of bashing the team that you love, like these guys to my right? But Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports, appreciate you giving us time. Sorry.
My bad.
Send us out with this, Jason. Ohio State, they lose their defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles. That happens. You win national championships. You're going to have to fill a lot of voids in your coaching staff. It's not that he left. It's who he left towards. Are you surprised that Jim Knowles took the Penn State job or Penn State defensive coordinator position?
I am surprised that. So let me say, like, look, taking the Penn State job for Knowles and his background, where he's from, and all those things makes a lot of sense. What I'm surprised by is that there wasn't, $1 million man. I'll go 80s wrestling here. Everybody's got a price. Man, I wouldn't want to let him leave. And when you're spending 20 in modern NFL, 30 or modern college football, $30 million on rosters, I don't care if you're operating at a $37.5 million loss on paper. I don't care about any of that. If I'm Ohio State, I don't want to let a great coach out the door. So I'm not surprised that he took the job. I am surprised that they didn't go straight in like $1 million man and say, everybody's got a price. What's going to keep you here? Let's keep running this thing back. So I am surprised he's not the Ohio State defensive coordinator, because I wouldn't let him walk out the building for any dollar amount. But I'm not surprised he took the Penn State job. Particularly, it gives Penn State one of the most creative offensive minds in college football on the offensive side of the ball, and it gives them one of the most respected defensive coordinators. So it's a huge, huge, huge hire for James Franklin, and James Franklin is up against it right now the way that Ryan Day's been up against it for a long time. So I'm not surprised by the desperation heave of cash to hire a great coordinator. I'm just surprised Ohio State didn't have a stick with us sales pitch that kept him in the room.
Last year, Chip Kelly was the head coach of UCLA and now in the Big Ten. He leaves the head coaching gig to become the offensive coordinator for Ohio State. There's another coach in the Big Ten that Jacob brought up yesterday that could maybe make sense to leave a head coaching gig to go be the defensive coordinator for Ryan Day and the Buckeyes, and that's Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. It just doesn't seem like Wisconsin's trending in that right direction. Luke Fickell was one of the hottest up-and-coming coaches in college football. That seems to have fizzled out. All of a sudden, Chip Kelly's wanted by the NFL again because of what he's done at Ohio State. Could a resurgence be needed for a coach like Luke Fickell? Could he make sense? It'd be wild, but would it make sense for him to leave Wisconsin to take the defensive coordinator job at Ohio State?
Yeah, it totally makes sense to take that job. Like, Wisconsin's one of those programs, too, and this is across the board in college football. SEC's got some of these. Big Ten's got some of these. There are certain programs that need to recalibrate what their expectations are. Michigan State also comes to mind. For years, some of these Big Ten schools looked at it and they're like, you know what? We're going to be a 9-win, 10-win team, and every once in a while we'll have that pop that gets us right on the cusp of the college football playoff. That's not a bad place to be, and I can see that logic. Unfortunately, the Big Ten has gotten so good. I don't know that Wisconsin, that middle tier anymore is any more a 9-10 win team. They feel more like they're a 7-8 win team, and that's a much different world to be living in. Wisconsin's going to have to be really comfortable with a random bowl game that nobody cares about and a playoff appearance once every blue moon. That, over time, it just is going to sink into the world of irrelevance. So if I'm Luke Fickell and I have the chance to go be part of a national championship on a defensive coordinator gig where I'm making a ton of money and I don't have nearly the pressure and I can just sit back and do what I do really well and I can put myself in a great situation for the future, I would do that 10 times out of 10. There's not a reason I wouldn't take the Ohio State defensive coordinator job over a mid-tier, and that's what they are at this point. Like, I would argue that, knowing UNLV well, obviously, Odom being their head coach and leaving for Purdue, Odom had a better chance at the college football playoff at UNLV than he will ever have at Purdue. He has gone somewhere where he's going to make more money and have more resources. Great. Good for him. That is awesome. Go make your money. But he's not going to make the college football playoff ever. If you go to UNLV, the group of 5 opportunity at least lets you once in a while get that big extra cash bonus and make the college football playoff. Fickell is going to quickly realize that there is, I don't believe, a true path to the college football playoff for a team like Wisconsin, barring a weird year or a miracle season more than once every, decade? So, yeah, I'd go take that DC job in a heartbeat.
All right, Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports, gave us a lot of time. Appreciate you as always. We'll talk next week. Thank you again. Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Jason, thank you.
Always, my friends. I appreciate you. See you next week.
All right, more Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers when we come back. All right, and we're back Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. I made sure to give you credit, Jake, and said that it was your idea for the Luke Fickell thing, by the way.
And
Good assist.
saw it somewhere.
I saw you wide open.
Ran with it.
I saw you open in the corner, dished it out to
I
you.
love that. Corner three.
Yeah. No, I talked about it on my show yesterday, and a lot of people took off with that too. And it's unlikely, but look, no one was talking about Chip Kelly doing this a year ago. It just kind of caught everybody by surprise, and I think it would make a lot of sense for Luke Fickell.
Yeah.
And you brought that up because that's what I was saying yesterday. Is they needed an experienced person to go take over that DC position. I don't want just an inexperienced coordinator getting a first-time opportunity at Ohio State. And then that's when you brought up the name Luke Fickell. I'm like, that's the perfect name. That just makes all the sense in the world. Wisconsin, that's an uphill climb that I don't even think he can climb. And that may not be an indictment on him. I just think it's more of the limitations on the resources of that program in the landscape of college football right now. You reset because you're going to get fired. If he's going to get fired at the end of this year, not because he's a bad coach, but just because they're just kind of running in place a bit, save face. Don't get fired. Go to Ohio State, take the DC job, and then in a year, 2 years, basically have the option to pick any job you want, and just don't make a mistake of picking a mid-tier program next time.
Yeah, I think it makes a ton of sense if he's feeling any heat on his seat. I don't know why you would try to battle through that in Wisconsin. I know we talked about this expanded playoff giving teams like Wisconsin. I think they were one of the teams that people usually circled as getting a big benefit from this new format. But I just don't think they have a chance. Like looking at the playoff this year, even I don't see a path for a team like a Wisconsin to get in there. Like the teams we're talking about on the fringe getting in with the 2 losses. That's an SMU because they play in an ACC where they get to a conference championship. What would it take for Wisconsin to get to a Big Ten championship? I mean, if we're looking at teams in the Big Ten we think can win 10 games, I think it takes a little bit till you get to Wisconsin. They were always that 3rd, 4th team and were incredibly benefited by the Big Ten West and basically getting a free ticket, them Iowa or Northwestern, to Indianapolis. And that's why that program is viewed how that program is viewed. But I know UCLA and USC are kind of dragging their feet right now. Washington made a national championship 2 years ago, but they weren't anything special this year. I still think those 4 additions, including Oregon, are better than Wisconsin in the Big Ten. So that just continues to slide them down. I don't think I would put Wisconsin with like an Arkansas in terms of where they fall in the college football landscape. I don't think they have a chance to win a championship. And I think if Luke Fickell, with what he did at UC, I know it's kind of in the back of people's minds, but if he leaves Wisconsin, coaches 2, 3, 4 top 5 defenses at Ohio State, wins a national championship, maybe everyone holds on to UC and Ohio State, and kind of the couple of years at Wisconsin go on the back burner, and then Luke Fickell's viewed as one of the best coaches in an upcoming cycle. So I think it makes a lot of sense for him, both career-wise and just wanting to win-wise. I think it really checks most boxes.
The only thing I would say is Luke Fickell being regarded as one of the best head coaches in college football for several years, and then seemingly quit to be a defensive coordinator obviously isn't a good look. So that would be my argument against it. I don't think Luke Fickell has any interest in being second fiddle. I think he's probably thinks that he's reached the mountaintop and he wants to stay there. So I don't know if he would be the DC at Ohio State. I certainly know he would take the head coaching job, but the DC, I don't think so. I think he might lose his job and he'll probably have to go back down to a school that can win a lot of games in a lesser conference. Because I do agree with Jacob to an extent where Wisconsin, though they play in a great football conference, it's sometimes better to be the big fish in the small pond, right? Opposed to you're Wisconsin, but you have no shot to ever win a Big Ten championship.
Yeah, and you brought up the point about Fickell not wanting to be second fiddle, and it wasn't even a month and a half ago. Fickell was one of the names people kept bringing up, like just bring Fickell back, get rid of Ryan Day, bring Fickell back, and now Fickell is an afterthought because Ryan Day goes and wins a national championship. And then yesterday on the show, people had brought up, well, how can you say Wisconsin has no chance of winning a national championship? You look at or of making the playoff and all this when you look at what Cignetti did in year one at Indiana. Fitz just brought it up. You know how many things would have to go right for them to be able to strike gold on that? And what that was for Indiana was, for one, very good quarterback. That helps, obviously. And Indiana was very solid. Let's be clear. Give them whatever due you need to there. But you also didn't have to play Oregon. You didn't have to play, you know what I mean? Like you
didn't have to pay Louisville because you paid $1 million.
Yep. And then you obviously playing Michigan on a season where they're a 5-loss, down, Michigan in a down year. You got to avoid some landmines throughout the schedule. It was a very, very favorable schedule, and they, took advantage of that. So Wisconsin doesn't get to take advantage of that. They play those teams every year, and that's going to be the tough part for them. So Wisconsin, I don't know. It's unlikely, but to your point, he wants to stay at the top of the mountain. Chip Kelly was trending towards being fired at UCLA. Had he got fired from UCLA, not saying he had no chance of ending up as OC of Ohio State, but I don't think it would have been as much of a splash. Oh, a coach that couldn't cut it at UCLA is going to come be the OC for Ryan Day. It just made sense, and I think it would make sense for Fickell.
Wisconsin's schedule this year, too, he might be trying to avoid that sucker. They go to Alabama, to Michigan, Ohio State at home, at Oregon, at Indiana, Illinois, and Washington.
He's fired, dude.
I mean, they're going to lose 7 games.
Yeah.
Go be the DC or get fired. It's that simple. To me, it's a simple choice for Luke Fickell. Get fired or go be the defensive coordinator for Ohio State. I will say this. Fitz said he was surprised that Ohio State just let him go. Me and you discussed this last week. I said, well, regardless of what our opinions are of Jim Knowles, Ohio State's going to let us know. And they did give him, I think it was like I thought I saw $560,000 raise, which would have made him the highest paid defensive coordinator in football. That wasn't enough. They wouldn't match Oklahoma or what Penn State would do. Penn State and them, they really, really needed him. I think Ohio State was kind of letting us know, like, you can take that, become the highest paid defensive coordinator in football. It's the Ohio State University. You just won a national championship with us. If you want to go somewhere else, that's fine. I think that's the confidence of the program saying, we value what we have here. I think that they need you more than we need you. Is that wrong in saying it that way?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think if you're Ohio State, obviously it's not all the same. The money's not coming from the same spot, but you have to have the debate of, would you rather have a $3 million DC or a $2 million DC and $1 million safety? So, I think that's part of a conversation with all of this too, and the budget deficit conversation with Ohio State athletics, I think probably comes.
Yeah, that was wild.
Yeah, I was trying to read about that, try to understand more. There was like a $35 million, $37 million budget deficit for Ohio State athletics. NIL obviously has nothing to do with that because that's not school money, but that's what everyone's obviously pointing to first. So I think that probably has a conversation with that too. If you're going to make a DC a $3.5 million offer, $3 million offer, then you have to talk about how that affects the school. And maybe you believe in a guy like Matt Gruary, the safeties coach who Ryan Day's talked about a ton, and you're going to promote from within with a cheaper option and really believe in your players. And if they go that route, I hope they're right, because the last time they went that route, it didn't work.
Speaking of defensive coordinators, we'll stay here. So yesterday had a chance. Look, we've talked Al Golden at nauseum at this point. I feel like he's been the DC for a long time, but he hasn't been. It's just that's the name that was floated out there as a possibility, and then based on the lack of activity on the interview front, it just kind of, we all figured that was going to be the case. Like, they had locked in on their guy, as you talked about earlier with Jason. We knew that he was going to be the guy, and they made it official. And then yesterday he was introduced to Bengals fans and, of course, the media. Here's Al Golden at yesterday's Bengals press conference of him being introduced to the media and fans. Here's your Cincinnati Bengals new defensive coordinator, Al Golden.
Defense to be a championship level defense, what does that need to entail?
Well, I think, one heartbeat for sure. We all have to believe in the same thing. And we talked about it earlier. There's going to be, there's not going to be much gray. I don't live in that gray world. I think it's very important that for us to be a championship defense, we're going to have to be empowered. I can't make all the calls. Same thing with the staff. You make a certain call, the players have to have, the trust and ingenuity and confidence to make a specific adjustment on the field. And so at some point you have to turn the keys over to the players. There'll be a certain way that we disrupt the football. There'll be a specific way that we tackle in certain environments and certain situations. There's going to be indicators for us in situations that we're going to have to recognize the situation and perform accordingly. And ultimately, we want to be really good, at tackling and doing the little things well. So I think one heartbeat, core fundamentals that bind us, and then ultimately a team that's player driven.
Look, in these press conferences, I mean, first of all, more times than not, you're always going to like what they say in a press conference, and he said all the right things. There's something he said that was not in that clip that I think, would make a lot of Bengals fans happy. He was asked about his approach and philosophy on rookies and how he would play rookies, and he said, "Well, we don't draft these guys to sit next to us on the sideline." And I think that that wasn't in that clip right there. That was just another quote from yesterday's press conference. I thought that was key. And a lot of the complaints that we've heard over the Bengals defense and philosophy over the years is just not really throwing these rookies out into the fire maybe and letting allowing them to get better and developing. Overall, just your takeaways just from that one soundbite right there of his introductory press conference yesterday.
Sounds similar to Lou. Fundamental defense, putting pressure on the players, making them guard, making them tackle, and I think that's something we kind of expected. And I really like Al Golden, and he continues to say the right things, as you just said, and he's putting emphasis on fixing the roster, and I think that's something that I really wanted to see, that I really wanted to hear, that he believes in some of the guys we have here, that he's going to be able to get them up to speed and retool this defense, and kind of recognizing how far of a way they have to go. And I think that's the biggest thing with this offseason is, as the new DC coming in, obviously he has familiarity with some of these pieces being here on the Super Bowl run, but there's been massive changes to the Bengals defense since then. A lot of the star players then obviously aren't here now, and a lot of young guys here now weren't here then. So he has to get acquainted with the talent we have on the roster, who's capable of doing what. And he put an emphasis later in this press conference on DBs being able to tackle. And we know that was a big thing for him at Notre Dame. And I think that comes into play with a lot of the guys we've talked about potentially cutting and what roles they play in the defense after this offseason. Guys like Geno Stone, Cam Taylor-Britt. If you don't think Geno Stone can tackle, we know Geno Stone can't tackle. If Al Golden doesn't think Geno Stone can tackle, maybe you're moving on from him and getting another safety, because that's something you prioritize in this defensive system. So I think that the way he talks about individual players, the way he talks about what he values, what benefits the scheme he's trying to run, I think that's something we need to be paying a lot of attention to, because another guy, the best tackling DB on this team, Mike Hilton, is a pending free agent, someone that we've kind of brushed to the side and said we're going to let go at his older age as he starts to decline as a cover corner. But if Al Golden's going to emphasize tackling from the defensive backfield so much, maybe that's a guy you start to bring back. So that's the kind of stuff I'm focusing on in a lot of these press conferences. Can you find any nuggets about where he's going to go player personnel wise? Because that's the biggest thing. Al Golden could call a phenomenal defense, the best defensive scheme we've ever seen. If you don't have 11 players that can play, it doesn't matter. So it's going to come down to how much he can do to this roster, and it seems like he knows where he's going to go, and having a plan is the most important thing for me, believing in what he's going to do.
One of the big keys for the Bengals going forward is to be able to draft and then develop that talent from the draft and to somehow find some defensive gems. I think Al Golden gives the Bengals the best chance to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't think Lou Anarumo respectfully had that in him. I think he could get some free agents, as Jacob said. He could get some of those big-name guys, but I don't think he had we're going to develop Myles Murphy in him. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely out of touch on this. But I think a Cam Taylor-Britt, a Myles Murphy, a lot of these young defensive guys, they need somebody like they had in college. They need almost a college coach to get them ready for the NFL. I know they're already in the NFL, but that's at least what I see, at least what I saw last year. You're relying on all these free agent defensive players to hit when the key to this is to draft guys and have them be the success. And then you go out and you find supplemental pieces to help the roster there. Al Golden's going to be the guy that's going to help develop. He's going to have a say in who we draft. He's then going to develop that talent into NFL-ready players, and that's what I want, and that's who he's going to be. And that's why I think, which is why I agree with Jacob, I think he's going to be a step up from Lou Anarumo. And honestly, I could see him being a head coach in the NFL in 5 years. I think he has that type of personality. So we'll see, but I'm pretty excited for Al Golden. I don't think it's Like, again, it literally can't be worse.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to be upset about this hire.
The revisionist history of Lou Anarumo is crazy, and it was crazy after we fired him, and it's continued to grow through the Al Golden hire. And people in the chat right now talking about, are we sure this is an upgrade over Lou Anarumo? If we just hired a DC who can't have a top half of the league defense, then that's a bigger issue than that DC. That's an organizational problem for not being able to see that, because Lou Anarumo wasn't a top half of the league defense. So the bar is very low to be an improvement over Lou Anarumo, whether we want to admit it or not. I know the playoff runs were phenomenal. The defense stepped up in the biggest moments, but in the bulk, in the larger sample sizes, Lou Anarumo's defenses weren't good enough. And I think that is the biggest takeaway. Whether his message grew stale, he wasn't playing the young guys, whatever that is, his defenses just weren't good enough, and a change was needed, and a change was made. And I've said it time and time again since we hired Al Golden. The Bengals fans that are upset about this hire, they would be thrilled if he had the exact same resume, but instead of going to the Super Bowl 1 year in Cincinnati, he went 1 year in Philly or 1 year in Kansas City. If you just change that one nugget on his resume, every Bengals fan would be thrilled. But because it's a retread hire, it's a classic Bengals move, Mike Brown taking the easy way out, it's not good enough. I think Al Golden's going to be phenomenal, and I can't wait for him to take control.
Obviously, Jacob and Craig Sandlin host Chatterbox Bengals. I am curious. You talked about the Bengals fans who are upset with this. What's the approval rating for this, if you will? Like, are more people happy with it than unhappy with it, or what's the temperature of the room as far as this hire goes?
I think it's pretty close to like a 70-30, and I think the 30 that are upset about it had such lofty expectations that were never going to get solved anyway. The people that are really upset about an Al Golden hire are the people that wanted Robert Saleh or bust, or one of these ex-head coaches or bust. And when you look back on it, obviously hindsight's 20/20, and I'll try to justify the moves my favorite teams make, but I think those hires were always a little bit more of a reach. And I fell into that trap too. I think this was an incredibly desirable job, but you have to pay those guys as much, if not more, than you're paying Zach Taylor to be your head coach. And I just don't think mathematically or locker room vibes-wise that makes sense to do as a team. Al Golden gives you a lot longer of having a DC here than either of those guys. Robert Saleh has a good year. You go on a playoff run, and then boom, he's gone to being a head coach. You're back in the same boat. So I think a lot of people that are upset aren't necessarily upset about Al Golden. They're upset about what I asked Jason Fitz about the process, not having enough interviews, and they're upset about not getting an ex-head coach. So Robert Saleh also signed in San Francisco after not getting the Jacksonville Jaguars job, so nobody else was getting him unless they gave him a head coaching job. He was going back to San Francisco. So I think a lot of people are coming around on it. It's definitely grown as he spoke, and people have looked more into Al Golden. I also think a lot of Bengals fans that overlap with Ohio State fandom are clouded with judgment about this hire, because the last play of that game, a cover zero blitz on 3rd and 11, deep ball to Jeremiah Smith, and that's a tough play to wrap your head around. As someone, if you're rooting for Ohio State, how do you single cover that guy on the outside and blitz everyone in that situation? So I think that's affecting a lot of the views on this as well. But if you look at the whole body of work, Al Golden's a great hire.
Yeah, they're picturing Shakir up the sideline. They're picturing, obviously, Xavier Worthy up the sideline. They're picturing receivers of, rival teams that you envision running into in the playoffs, and the last thing you want to see is a defensive breakdown. But again, you could find defensive breakdowns with Ohio State made a defensive breakdown or two with that. But that's why they kicked their defensive coordinator out. That's why they got rid of him. So, and here's the other thing too. A lot of your opinions are not based on what you really want. A lot of your opinions are based on how the Bengals operate. And I think sometimes that's what people we run it, with the Cincinnati Reds, and we talk about targets for them. We never said, man, I would love this season for the Reds to go get, Juan Soto. That never once was said. Not that we don't want that. It's just we know how the Reds operate. And it's the same thing with the Cincinnati Bengals. Robert Saleh really never made sense. It should, because that's the difference. It should make sense. It should make sense to, the Niners are like, hey, we're going to get Robert Saleh. We're going to pay him whatever he needs. We want to make him our DC. That should be the mindset of the Cincinnati Bengals, but it's not. So your opinions, I'm assuming,
now,
based off how they operate versus how they should operate.
I will say the big difference between a team like San Francisco bringing in a Robert Saleh, who ideally, again, is a 1 or 2 year fix. Well, not even that. What does San Francisco have that we don't have? They have Nick Bosa and Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner and Tulu Hufanga, and they have locked-in starters that are ball players. And the Bengals are going to have to overhaul this defense. And I don't know if it's 8 players, like Jason Fitz said, but you're going to have to get new players on this defense, and that takes longer than a year. So say you need 6 players on this defense to get to a championship level. You get 4 of them this offseason. You think you need 2 more next offseason. Robert Saleh coaches a top 10 defense, and he leaves. You get a new DC who still has to keep rebuilding this defense. So I think even more than money, and maybe I'm just trying to find silver linings and help explain the Bengals out of something they should have done, because Robert Saleh would have been a phenomenal hire, and I'm not saying he wouldn't have. I just think with how much work has to be done on that side of the ball in Cincinnati personnel-wise, I think hiring someone that's going to be here for definitely longer than a year is something that probably played a little bit more than a lot of us thought originally.
We just have to wait till September to find out if it was good or not. Actually,
That's right.
Can't even really base it off that. But nonetheless, football's almost over. It's kind of sad.
I know.
It sucks. It sucks how fast the football season goes.
So fast, man.
I felt like we spent all of June and July saying, let's just get to football. And now here we are. Let's just get to June and July for the Reds, Maybe.
Yeah.
I guess.
Then we'll be just as miserable then.
Yeah. Let's get to June, July.
Let's get to those Cincinnati Reds, actually, because that's what we're going to talk about next. So if we were to go around the room on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the Cincinnati Reds offseason? I'm not sure what your rating would be. I'm assuming it wouldn't be very high, but apparently we must be high because we're missing something. We're very negative. For a Cincinnati-based show, we are not being homers like we should, apparently. Like, we're missing something. National media continues to put out glowing reviews of the Cincinnati Reds front office and how they've handled this offseason. And another national media member put out their thoughts on the Reds offseason, and we're going to get to that when we come back. We talked about Buster Olney's review of the Reds last week. MLB Network just put out a review. The Reds are getting glowing reviews across the board, and we're just trying to figure out what we're missing, and maybe we just need to get on board. We'll discuss when we come back. More Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. All right, Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Before we dive in to our Reds conversation, I know there's some super chats that have been coming in. By the way, for those in the chat, hit the like button down at the bottom. We appreciate that. But let's send it to Elliot. A couple super chats to get to.
Yes. Mark Fetters has been a member for 16 months.
Thank you, Mark
16
Fetters.
months. Reds 2025 World Champs. There we go.
I hope.
Mark Fetters, $5. Congratulations, Colton, our good friend Colton Melman. He is having a child as we speak.
He let us know that he was watching Off the Bench on his phone while his wife was in labor.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Colton,
First of all, congratulations. But that is,
Right,
there's
congratulations.
a lot of great things happening, and we're in the background.
I love
That's pretty cool.
could you imagine if Colton was watching during that? Could you, I bet that one show we did where we were throwing the helmets and everything that could have induced labor. I think that would have been a good way. And Justin Edgel, $1.99. Pete Carroll eats a lot of gum. So
He does.
There we go. Colton Melman, now another super chat for my baby Luke. There we go. Colton has been a member for 15 months.
Congratulations,
Colton. Colton's been helping me. I've been trying to work out more, so Colton's been helping me with that as well. So
very nice.
Congratulations to Colton. Let's go, Luke.
There you go. But again, congratulations on that, by the way. All right, Reds. I don't know why I said it like that. I should be saying Reds.
Apparently, we should.
We have this all wrong.
Ellie is gonna be on the cover of MLB The Show with 7 other.
I was gonna say
players.
so are like 5 other players.
With the rest of the league, but he's there. He's on there too. There's a lot of reasons to be excited about the Reds. There are.
Name them.
Hold on, real quick on that. The video game. I'm glad you brought that up. I don't like that they spread the wealth out throughout the league. I know why they do it, because if you add more players and more markets, it obviously generates more excitement. But I do feel like it used to mean more when it was just one exclusive cover athlete.
Is it going to be regional? Is that what it is? Or is this just a
Bud Light
marketing
cans,
thing?
Like the Bengals can, you can't.
Or is this just a
know.
marketing thing and we're going to vote on all these guys or something?
But I did forget about that when that came out yesterday. That's huge. Ellie De La Cruz, again, that just signifies that what all of baseball sees is he's one of the biggest stars in baseball.
Yeah.
You're not putting average players on the cover of that, but that is pretty exciting right there. Ellie De La Cruz is going to be on the video, on the cover of the video game,
maybe.
MLB The Show.
We
don't know.
Again, he's going to be. I don't know if he's going to be a background character. I don't know what Ellie De La Cruz will be on the cover, but it's just another reason for the Reds not being able to pay him. I saw Craig and Nick. They were arguing about this. I thought that was funny. I think Craig said plus 1,000.
Yeah.
That the Reds would sign
Kirby's
Ellie
was-
long term. Kirby was plus 100.
Well, yeah, plus 175.
Well, I'll go okay. Plus
The
175.
most Kirby line ever,
Yeah.
and I love it.
Plus 175. Listen. When we interviewed Tommy Thrall, was it last week or the week before?
Yeah, he ripped my heart out of my chest.
And Tommy Thrall coming out and saying, as the Reds radio broadcaster saying, it would take a heck of a lot of money, and it would almost seem unlikely. He didn't say that, but it appears unlikely that the Reds would be able to long-term sign Ellie De La Cruz. That was enough for me to be like, okay, I'm going to give up on that dream, and we're just going to try to enjoy the next 5 years or so, 4 years. So I hope Ellie's back, but again, it's evident that the league knows what kind of a superstar this guy is, and if nothing is able to be changed in 2 years when the CBA is up, I think we're in trouble.
Well, again, you talked about when Tommy Thrall came on and basically just it's one thing for us to say it. We've had this conversation even going into last summer. The Reds need to start, get an offer out on the table early, and who knows, maybe they have. It doesn't matter. He has to accept it, right? Like at the end of the day. But when you have Tommy Thrall coming up, but then when I hear Nick Kirby say it's unlikely, now I'm sad.
Yeah, that's fair.
Now I'm sad about that because, man, oh man, I guess just enjoy it for the next couple of years. But I tell you what you do with him over the next couple of years is all going to be based on the activity in the offseason and trade deadlines and any opportunities they have for player acquisition and obviously the development of the players in the system. And to be honest, they've checked that off. They've done a very good job developing this talent. Now, if it could just stay healthy, of course, that's been a problem for Cincinnati for many, many moons, of course. But when you going around the room, based on what the national reviews are, and we'll get to that in a moment, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the Reds offseason this year as far as trying to maximize the opportunity of having an Ellie De La Cruz on your roster and trying to put him and the team in the best position possible to compete in 2025? How would you evaluate their offseason on a scale of 1 to 10 at this point?
I wanted Jacob to go first, but that's
I'm letting Elliot go first. I'm going to say 6. 7?
I'm glad you. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna make me look bad.
6?
7.
They did things. They got players.
They did. They made the roster better.
Right. So it has to be above a 5.
It's a 5. They did enough.
I'll at least go 6.
They did enough to make the roster better, but I don't understand at the beginning of this offseason Nick Krall saying outfield.
Well, he lied.
That's our most important need, and we didn't address the outfield. It's a bad outfield. We're going into this season with a really, really bad outfield. Obscure former Reds, shout out Obscure former Reds. He tweeted this. If you had to rank some of the worst outfields the Reds have had over the past 15 years or so, 2024 Steer, Friedel, Fraley, 2.3 WAR. 2014 Ludwig, Hamilton, and Bruce had a 1.1 WAR. 2009, Nick Tavares and Bruce, 2.2 WAR. 2008, Dunn, Patterson, Griffey, Bruce, 1.8 WAR.
Oh no!
So they've had worse outfields than what we had last year. They have. I just don't think sitting put on that 2.3 WAR between Steer, Friedel, and Fraley is enough to propel them into the playoffs. I don't think they did enough. I think they did. I'm trying not to be disrespectful. I'm trying to be as optimistic.
They hired the best manager on the market.
They hired the best manager on the market. They upgraded the pitching staff, right?
Gavin Lux plays every position you need him to play.
That's true. Like, there are reasons to be excited, and the roster did improve from last year. I just don't think if you're like, I wanted to see the Reds do more, what they did, certainly it's not enough for you, and it's not enough for me. It's not enough for me. I give them a 5 for the offseason. They've done a fine job, but it's just not – I don't know if it's going to be enough. the other side of that coin is you have so many question marks, so many young guys, Noelvi Marte, CES, Matt McClain. There's question marks all around the field, and it comes to a point where should you sign veteran bats, sign veteran guys to replace those guys this year, and then we'll just never know what we have in CES, Noelvi Marte, Matt McClain, yada, 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 go down the line, right? So there has to be a little bit of meeting in the middle when it comes to having your team prepared to compete in 2025, while also seeing what you have with the young guys, with the young core of this roster. It's a tough place to be if you're Nick Kroll, not to mention I'm not going to say he has a ton of money to work with. So I'm going to give him a 5. I'm going to say they've done enough to make it competitive for this season. It's just not enough to make the playoffs, I'm going to say.
So let's say that the Reds, we thought Skip Schumacher was the most realistic name that the Reds are going to get at manager. Terry Francona was kind of like the earlier we were talking about the Bengals. What they should go get is a lot different than what we expect them to go get. And that was the conversation earlier. And Skip Schumacher is what we expected them to get. Terry Francona being who they should go get, but didn't expect them to do it. And they did that. If the Reds would have just gone status quo and got a Skip Schumacher to be their manager and then added Gavin Lux and Brady Singer and made the same exact moves, I'm probably sitting at a 3 right now. But I do believe by going to get the best manager available, and we can have the debate of the best manager in baseball if we truly want to have that, I think that automatically puts them at a 5. I'll go 5.5. I'll go 5.5. I think Terry Francona, that's a massive addition that I don't think we're giving enough credit for. We just, I think, are disappointed because we felt that name was going to come with something. And it's not a disappointment in Terry Francona. It's just a disappointment from the lack of activity from that standpoint. So
Francona hire puts a floor of a 3.
Yes.
If Francona hired nothing else running back the roster, I think it's a 3.
Skip Schumacher with these moves, what are you sitting at?
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Like Lux is better because you have Lux next to Francona with Brady Singer and all that. But I do think we're undervaluing Lux. I do want to be clear on that. I just think, again, we're expecting a bigger name and not saying that we have Lux, we can't get a bigger name. It should have been Lux and a bigger name in the outfield or just in something. And maybe they still do. We could take a look at some of the players that are still available. It's not as if the Reds still can't pull the trigger on that. There still is time. It's just we're getting awfully close to spring training. So we're less than a month away from the first spring training game. And one of the cool things about Terry Francona that we've heard on the Reds Hot Stove League show in recent weeks is just spring training is going to be utilized as, actually preparing for the upcoming season. A lot of teams, the NBA is known for this too, where preseason's not preseason. The first 2 months are preseason, right? And like the NFL, we've talked about how bad football is in the month of September. And a lot of it is because a lot of teams don't really truly prioritize the time that they have in preseason for preseason football. And then it's like we don't really see teams get rolling until end of September, heading into August. So with all that being said, I'm just kind of sitting here right now looking at all of this, and I'm like, I don't know how to feel about it when it's all said and done. But we must be super down on this team compared to everyone else, because last week we talked about Buster Olney coming out, put out his top 5 most improved teams in baseball. I don't know if you were here for this one. I don't think you were, but either
I think
way,
I was.
or you weren't here for. So Buster Olney puts out this list, his top 5 most improved teams in baseball, and the Reds are sitting on top of that list. I'm like, this is Buster Olney. This isn't just some random blog writer off to the side. So it got my attention. I still was kind of laughing at it, but he's not the only one. Take a look here. MLB Network is jumping in on the party as well. MLB Network's Dan O'Dowd said that the Reds had the most impressive offseason of any team other than the Dodgers. How could you pick the Dodgers over the Reds as having a more impressive offseason? But yes, the Reds obviously hiring Terry Francona is key. You see that in the drop down there. They added Brady Singer and Gavin Lux. I mean, you look at the Red Sox. I mean, they had a Aroldis Chapman, a very, very good closer, and a Garrett Crochet and a Walker Buehler. I mean, did the Reds really improve better than the Red Sox with those additions? Like, I don't know. What are we missing, guys? I don't want to be anti-Reds.
I really do.
Because we love the Reds.
I really do think the Terry Francona thing is where everybody...
That's all the way.
The Reds objectively hired the best possible manager available.
Not even available.
Yeah,
he wasn't available.
Yeah. That's
he was retired.
That's where I think the national media and everybody is getting very excited, and rightfully so, because not one person in this room thought it was possible. Probably nobody in the baseball world thought it was possible that Terry Francona was going to be the Reds manager. So that's probably where most of the excitement, where most of the hope and optimism and all of the storylines will be this year. It'll be on Terry Francona. Can he elevate the roster in a way that David Bell couldn't? I think he can. I came in to this show right around the end of last season, and I said it's probably going to be the Skip Schumacher, and it's probably not going to make a difference because there's a lot of managers in baseball today that don't make a difference, and that's a fact. They don't make a difference. Terry Francona makes the difference, and I think people are starting to see, if he's able to do what he did in Cleveland here in Cincinnati, this is going to be a successful tenure. This is going to be exciting for not only just Reds fans, for baseball fans. So, yeah, that's where all the hype is. It's all on Terry Francona. It's not on Gavin Lux and Brady Singer, who are good additions, just not enough to, in my opinion, make the playoffs.
Yeah, like I said, the Red Sox, you had Crochet, you had Aroldis Chapman and Bueller, and then you see that the Reds, Brady Singer, Gavin Lux, that's not better improvement than what the Red Sox did, but it goes back to be repetitive. It's all on our guy Terry Francona, who's friends with us now. We hung out with him.
Yeah, that's true.
We have a picture with him.
Looking at those top
photo.
6 on that list that we just put up for the most impressive off seasons, there's one missing. I feel like, the additions of rookie Sasaki and Teoscar Hernandez and Haesung Kim, I feel like that's a pretty good offseason in terms of improving your roster.
I'd say so.
That top 6 did not include the Dodgers, who I think has pretty clearly had the best offseason.
By the way, this is the second straight national media member to put out a list of the top 5 most improved, and then putting out this is how you know baseball is effed, is because the Dodgers they got so much better that they didn't count them. They didn't count them. They said, here's the top 5
right.
Here's the top 5 most improved teams in baseball. But we're not counting the Dodgers because, they're on a whole other stratosphere, so we're just going to count these normal loser teams over here. That's how effed baseball is that the Dodgers, because of what they did, we're not even counting them as a baseball team at this point.
Yeah, no, we shouldn't. We should just pencil. They don't have to play the 162.
Yeah.
Just give them 120 wins, pencil them in the play.
I'd actually be okay with that. I'd honestly, you can have 110 right now. Just take it. I don't need to watch it.
It's yours. There you go.
We have at least we have a really interesting race in the NL West.
Yeah.
Dodgers minus 400 to win the NL West.
I feel like you have to put some money on them not winning the West, right? Could something crazy?
Yeah, you want to take
happen
the top 12 team in baseball, Diamondbacks, at plus 900 to win their division. We don't think there's a problem here.
What about the Rockies?
Oh yeah, I don't
Trace
even.
Trace had a good tweet about that the other
bet
day. It was since 1969, Major League Baseball has had a team go from last place to first place in their division a total of 13 times. Since 1969, a team went from last place to first place 13 times. It's 55 years, 56 years. The NFL has had that happen 13 times since 2010. So
that happens at least once a year in the NFL.
Yeah, it's kind of a wild place to be in Major League Baseball right now. Again, once we get to the end of the 2026 season and we start negotiating, we will lose a season. There's no doubt about it. We will lose at least a good portion of a season.
Is that our best chance at re-signing Ellie?
Yeah.
Change to the structure of contract?
That's going to be the summer of Angel Reese, baby. Oh, I can't wait.
2026 with no baseball.
Off the bench, opening up with Angel Reese
Just talking
topics.
the W all day.
Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese. Maybe another woman will be worthy of talking about in the WNBA. I don't know. What? What'd I say?
Nothing.
Name a third woman in the WNBA.
I thought you were just going to stop.
I don't like this bit.
You can't. It's not a bit.
Elena Deladon.
I don't like this
Washington
bit.
Mystics.
Challenge accepted. Passed.
But yeah, it's a wild time in baseball right now, and I'm gonna try to enjoy it. I'm gonna try to be more positive this year than I've ever been as a Reds fan. That's my mission. I'm gonna try to Kirby myself. I'm gonna try to put a little of that Nick Kirby magic in me, and we're gonna make this season a magical season because I'm tired of coming in every year with just a disappointing outlook. Last year I was more positive than probably I've ever been coming in. Then all the injuries happen. It's like, all right, we don't really have a fair shot. Assuming nobody gets hurt in spring training, I'm going to feel very, very good that the Reds are going to be able to win or at least compete for a chance to win the NL Central because I don't think the NL Central is good.
Fair enough. All right, Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. We'll close out the radio portion of this when we come back.
And welcome back in Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, our final radio segment of the day. I saw this on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call
Everything
it.
app.
Huh?
The everything.
The Everything app. It all happens on X.
It does.
Christian Yelich came out. I forget what podcast he was on, but Christian Yelich was talking about the Dodgers, and
Yeah.
he said it's great that the Dodgers have a front office and an ownership group that care about the roster and the team and care about wins and losses. That's the part of it too where the Dodgers are going to walk away from all of this after ruining our sport. They're going to walk away looking like kings amongst these players.
Yeah.
And I saw, who was it? Jimmy's pitcher.
Screwball?
No, Flaherty.
Yeah.
Flaherty came out and tweeted out, like, don't get mad at the Dodgers for spending all this money because they care. And to be fair, like, I don't hate the Dodgers because they're doing their job as a good franchise, paying as much money as possible to great elite talent and putting the best possible chance to win out on the field.
I do hate them.
You do hate them? And that's fine. I don't hate them for that. I just don't like that, we're going to come into this season and it's such a blatant talent discrepancy between the Dodgers and then you look at the bottom teams and it's just not right.
And that's the biggest thing, I think, is everyone focuses on the Dodgers, and rightfully so. I mean, these contracts are getting insane. The payroll's getting insane. But I think the conversation around teams like the Marlins needs to be just as loud. I think that's just as big of a problem as the Dodgers signing, all these All-Stars and MVPs. I mean, the Marlins are set right now to have a $26 million payroll in 2026.
That's embarrassing.
$26 million.
That's embarrassing.
That is just as big of a problem as the Dodgers and their 305 or whatever, 320 or whatever it is, and you're just throwing away seasons. And there's 30 MLB teams. They should at least be trying to be competitive. I know not everyone's going to be competitive. There's going to be down years, and there's going to be years where you don't pay people as much. But it's just not okay to have that big of a discrepancy.
Like we talk about like league expansion in the NBA, NHL. I think there could be a league shrink in Major League Baseball, and it would probably help the sport more. That's what I honestly believe. Because the Colorado Rockies, the Miami Marlins, these type of teams, you could put the Reds in there. They don't add anything to the league. They really don't. And there's so many owners that are unwilling to care about winning baseball games, and it's just destroying everything. So it's hard for me to sit right here where I am as a team that's a fan of a team that's made the playoffs 4 times in 30 years. I look at the Dodgers and I look at Cohen and the Mets and I look at the Yankees and I sit here and say, look what they're doing. They're doing their jobs. And you have ours that are begging for pennies with these FanDuel Sports Network deals and stuff like that. It's just a difficult place to be, and something's going to change. I don't know what or how much is going to change in 2 years, but it's going to be a significant one, and I'm hoping it's for the betterment of the sport, because this is a little bit of a joke.
It feels like we're teetering on the brink.
Yeah, it does.
Baseball as a whole, MLB as a whole, it feels like we're nearing something, and whether that's a major change or an overhaul of how baseball contracts are given out and signed, I don't know what the answer is, but we're going to find out when the CBA is up, because that's the last piece of negotiation tactics that small market teams have left. I mean, they can't compete with the money that's being thrown out there, so they're going to have to use this CBA to try to combat it. And I mean, we'll probably lose at least half a season, if not a full season.
I bet a full season.
I would be shocked if this is handled well at all.
If these small market owners care anything about their sport or about their fans or about their team, they're going to make this lockout last until some sort of resolution is made to fix this sport, because it's broken. I mean, we have a broken sport right now. I love baseball. I will always love baseball. I love going to Great American Ballpark. I love traveling. I've been to 11 different ballparks. I'm going to keep trying to go to more and more every year. Jacob and I were talking about going to the game in
Bristol.
In Bristol. Like, there's so many cool things that baseball does. Just the one bad thing is the talent discrepancy, and that's a credit to the NFL, NBA, NHL, who constantly has to even out the talent amongst their leagues. So we'll see what happens going forward. But that's pretty much the last thing I had to add on this, because we talk about what did the Reds grade. The Reds are graded on a curve because they don't have $800 million. They don't. They don't have $500 million to spend. They have a different amount of money. I'd argue that they still didn't do what they should have done with the money that they had, but we'll see.
So is this a radio?
Yes.
Segment? Okay. Nice job. Okay, cool. Don't open up what I just sent you because I want you to guess something real quick before.
Okay.
I already
Case,
saw it.
So you
I haven't seen it.
Do you have it ready, Case? I will have it ready. All right, so don't pop it up yet. But if you the last 2 off seasons, because I don't know if you thought it was surprising. But
It surprised me.
if you look at all the teams in baseball, how high? Like when you look at all the teams and how much they've spent in free agency the last 2 years, how high up on that list do you think the Reds are? Do you think as far as like spending the most money to the least money?
Last 2 off seasons.
I want to say they're top 20.
They are. Would you be surprised if I told you that they're sitting at number 12?
Really?
That they have spent the 12th most money in free agency the last 2 years. And again, the Dodgers always being put in a category up to their own.
That's insane.
We're talking 2 teams spending $1 billion, and even the Giants. Who
Other than the Mets, the Dodgers spent $1 billion more than everyone.
That's impressive. But what caught my attention is just the fact that the Reds have spent more than obviously the Cardinals, but the Red Sox. I mean, there's a lot of teams, the Braves. There's a lot of teams that they have spent more money than. That is kind of surprising.
Yeah.
It's also not.
Does this
surprising.
include extensions and stuff, or no? This is
I think it's just free agents.
Just free agents.
So, and you talked about the Marlins right there, $5 million. They've only spent $5 million over the last 2 years. We feel like we are just in hell following a franchise that doesn't spend money. But the problem is again, you spend money, but what do you have to show for it? I mean, like that's the other thing too.
Yeah.
But so this tells a different story, I guess. The Reds have spent $132 million in free agency over the last 2 years. That's the 12th most in baseball. That sounds more impressive than what I thought it would be, to be quite honest. Because when I first saw them put that out, I immediately started at the back end, like starting to tally up, and I'm like, oh wow, I haven't found. Oh, there they are. They're in the top half. Did not expect that.
I mean, it is interesting. It certainly is interesting.
But, all right, well, that wraps it up for us on the radio side. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and hanging out with us today. We'll do it again tomorrow. Shout out to Jason Fitz, who co-hosted half the show.
Yeah.
He's the best.
Our guy.
He does Mike Golick and Mike Golick Jr. They do a show from 8 to 10, and he basically does the same thing. He does half their show with them, too.
That's awesome.
So I appreciate it. I can't believe he does that, but we appreciate it, no doubt. But until tomorrow, this has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, and ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. Bearcats back in action tonight.
They are.
They certainly are.
Let's practice that positivity that we talked about. Let's see how much of a spin you can. No, who do they have tonight?
Utah.
What's the line?
Utah's favorite.
Utah is favored by 1.5 at home.
And you don't sound like you have any confidence in the Bearcats being.
No, I would say I have very little confidence. It is Wes Miller's birthday today. So
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Wes. I saw
He has to get a win on his
I saw
birthday,
there
right?
were some funny Xavier accounts in the mentions of that tweet. What better way to, give somebody a happy birthday than with a contract extension? So why not extend it again? Very, very funny stuff. I went on my UC rant yesterday. I don't need to do it again today until tomorrow after they lose, but it's an unfortunate situation right now, and I'm hoping that it can be resolved and I can see a little bit of fight. It just seems like there's been so much regression from every single player that it's shocking. It's shocking.
So when we talk rivalries all the time, like these are two weird examples of rivalry. How much do you prioritize it over everything else? I don't want to do a repetitive topic. I'm just saying it's ironic how it's laid out. Cincinnati beat Xavier.
Yeah.
But they're having a season from hell since then. And Xavier's played really well despite losing the rivalry game. Michigan had a season from hell, but they got a win over their rival. And the team that lost goes on to win a national championship. So that really puts you in that position of which team would you rather be in that case? The team that won the rivalry game or the team that goes on to either make the NCAA tournament or win a national championship like Ohio State did. It's kind of an interesting crossover there.
Yeah, I was against Jacob's side the entire time. I mean, I would rather make the tournament and make the Sweet 16 than beat Xavier every single year, and it's not remotely close. Not even a little bit close. I'd like to beat Xavier. It's a big game on our schedule, but it's
the only quad one win.
It's that's going to be tough to hear all year. Yeah, it is our only quad one win, but I'm hoping the Bearcats are going to be able to not only beat Xavier in the years coming up, but also hopefully make a tournament one of these days. That would be nice. That would be my dream. Mouse Cop has a breaking news. And he's also slandering the good name of Wes because there's nothing like defending a coach 6-33 in quad one games. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I can't do. There's nothing else I can say with that. And I don't.
Do you think UC's
next
tournament appearance comes with Wes Miller as the coach?
No, I don't. I don't think so.
Do you think UC's next tournament appearance comes within the next 3 years? Not counting this season?
Because I'm seeing a rematch in the NIT.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm seeing a rematch in the NIT this year, Dayton and Cincinnati. It's just a matter of whether Dayton has to play at Cincinnati or Cincinnati at Dayton. But that's where both teams are trending right now since their top 25 showdown.
I've just been so beaten down that I just can't see him ever winning, and I'm hoping that can change. But I don't know. They got to beat somebody good going forward if they want a chance to fight this season. And I don't think they've got it in them, unfortunately. You lose by 30 to BYU. I mean, you lost by 30. You lost by 20 to Baylor. It's not a competitive team like we all thought it was going to be. So it's unfortunate. But Mouse Cop did have some breaking news. He said the 2025 College Basketball National Championship will tip off 30 minutes earlier than the usual 9:20. So there you go.
What will we do with all that time?
Oh, no.
Tipping off earlier needs to be a priority for that. I mean, I know that ratings plummet for the NCAA tournament as the tournament goes on, so it could just be we're not going to fully prioritize the ratings for it at the end of the day. But, I mean, where is it this year again? Where's
San Antonio, right? This year?
Yeah, yes.
So it's not like it's on the West Coast, but, yeah, that's
Mr. Mo asks, where would you rank UC in the Ohio college basketball team rankings?
Ooh.
I mean, NKU's split with them the last 2 times, so NKU's also made the tournament more times recently. I'm a UC guy. Xavier's certainly had a better go at it. I think Dayton's had probably a better go at it.
In recent history, though?
Well, recent history, UC hasn't made the tournament since 2019.
Dayton won a national championship.
They did.
The banner is hung.
And then there's
UD won a tournament game last year.
Wright State.
State has 2 tournament appearances and a tournament win in the last 6 years.
So you what a sick laugh.
I mean,
what a sick laugh. So UC ranks dead last. UC ranks dead last. UC ranks dead last in Ohio.
I'm not really advocating that Wright State's ahead of UC.
Ohio State? What has Ohio State done?
I don't know.
They've made
Probably nothing.
Holtman made the tournament in 3 of the 5 years, or 4 of the 5 years he was there. So 3 of the 5 because he missed it the last 2, and that's why they gave him the boot.
I don't know, man. It's brutal, but play tonight, 10 p.m. See everybody there.
We should host a pregame show for UC. I mean, if that doesn't get the people going, I don't know what will.
Yeah.
Chatterbox Bearcats will do it. They'll do a good job tonight. I mean, Houdini's been beaten up. He's trying his best. He's putting on a uniform. He's putting up the jersey. He's asking coach to put him in the game, and it's just not working. Nothing's working. There's no fight in the roster anymore. And I don't know. I have nothing else to say.
Xavier, they won 4 of their last 5.
Xavier's good.
4 of their last 5.
Xavier's
2
really
of those
good.
against top 25 teams in Marquette and UConn. They did not crack the top 25 though when that came out. Obviously not.
No, they are not top 25.
Now they beat UConn on Monday night though, right? Or what is today? What is
They
today?
beat
Tuesday?
UConn on Saturday.
Saturday. Okay. So that didn't boot. So that would have meant they would have had 2 top 25 wins in their last 4 wins, but it just didn't put them into the top. Yeah. So, but they're playing good.
They beat if Xavier beats Creighton tomorrow, I'd imagine we're talking. I mean, we're having a lot of different conversations with Xavier because their tournament vision is at 2020 right now. They look good.
They have Creighton, Georgetown, Villanova, Providence, and DePaul, Butler, all that coming up. Thad Matta, former Buckeye coach. Things aren't going too hot at Butler.
No.
But
that's it.
Either way.
Yeah. I will say this too. Like, I mean, college basketball has been absolutely insane this year. Do you think this is the year, and as college basketball guys, as we all are in here, you have Auburn at the top, you have Duke at the top. I think Tennessee is pretty damn good. I don't know about Kentucky. I know they're dealing with maybe a little bit of injuries.
They play Tennessee tonight.
Right now, so that'll be interesting. Who do you think, as of right now, has the best shot to win the title?
There is not, and obviously March is a gauntlet, and it's a long ways away, and a lot can happen. There is not a team in the country that can sniff Auburn right now. It's not even. Auburn's not good. Even close. I mean, they're 7-8 deep. Johnny Broome is pretty distantly the best player in the country, I think, for teams in that conversation of national champions. Duke, obviously, if Cooper Flagg can turn it on, they're always going to be dangerous. But I just think Auburn is so good, and the way they were able to roll when Broome missed 2 games, and still win by 20 plus, I think Auburn is on a different level.
I think Iowa State is good, but there is something about Iowa State where I don't think they're going to have enough to win a championship. Houston could win it. Houston's damn good. Kansas has been a weird team all year.
I was very high on them coming into the season.
Yeah, so was I, and Kansas has struggled mightily. I feel like for their standards, you lose to Iowa State by pretty much 20 points. You beat UC, but that was the ugliest win in probably the history of Kansas's program. I don't know. I think Kansas is good. I think they're competitive. I don't know if they're going to be able to win a championship this season. Same with Kentucky. I think Kentucky's overperforming this year. I just don't think they're going to have enough. I think it's going to come down to Auburn. It's going to come down to Tennessee and Alabama and Duke.
I was going to say, I think Alabama has a shot.
Alabama has a shot.
I think Alabama's a really good team. If they can get some shots to fall, they'll be okay. They have Mississippi State, 14th ranked Mississippi State coming up on Friday or Thursday, and then 3 unranked games before going through the worst gauntlet I've ever seen in college basketball. Number 1, Auburn, 20 Mizzou, 12 Kentucky, 14 Mississippi State, 8 Tennessee, 5 Florida, and then ending the regular season against number 1 Auburn. So we're going to see exactly how good Alabama is before the SEC tournament, before the March Madness tournament. So, yeah, we'll get a good beat on those SEC teams. Jay Billis said that he thinks this year winning March Madness is going to be easier than winning the SEC tournament.
No way.
Yeah.
Seriously?
That's what he said. That was the quote.
By the way, Mouse Cup has some stats here. Since 2013, only one number 1 seed has won March Madness. The last time number 1 seed was 2013 with Louisville. Since then, only 4 number 1 seeds have reached the Final Four, which is an interesting nugget. Bruce Pearl, that sweaty little guy that Bruce Pearl
so
is. I could see him losing, getting bounced. In the
hope they don't play Yale
Sweet
again.
16, Elite 8.
So, Archie Miller, former coach at Dayton, had a quote last night that has kind of made its way around college basketball circles. I mean, he's quite a mathematician. I sent it to you, Casey. Do you have that? Can you pull that up real quick?
Was UConn not the number 1 seed last year?
That's what I.
They were the number 1 overall seed last season.
That's what I thought too. But Mouse said that. I think.
I just looked it up.
Yeah, so Mouse Cup might have lied to us on that one.
Yeah, UConn was the number 1 overall seed last year.
So real quick on.
I thought Kansas was the number 1 seed when they won it too.
I'll check.
And that's always, I mean, March. That's why it's like the tournament is the best tournament, but it's one of those. The best team really wins it all every single year. Now, UConn has been the best team the last couple of years.
Yeah.
With that, so Archie Miller last night had this gem in the post game after Rhode Island. I haven't talked about Archie in quite some time, but take a listen to his comment about the SEC and the win percentage of teams in conference. Take a listen.
Difficult. I heard somebody say the other day, like, the SEC is the best league in the country, but in all games they're like 54 and 54. Somebody said that. I don't know if that's even accurate, but like, do you know how hard it is in every league, to win? It's just hard to win any game. And I think
did you see that?
Yeah, the person who said it was Jacob Pickle, at Pickle07. Was the person who I believe tweeted that one out, and Archie ran with it, unfortunately.
So here's the deal. The record of every conference is always going to be
It's going to be 500.
There will always be a team in your conference that wins a conference game, and there will always be a team in your conference that loses a conference game. split right down the middle. But I don't even know if it's accurate. But I don't even
Jacob
know
Pickles,
if this...
the head of Alabama's student section, head of the Crimson Chaos.
Really?
He leads the student section. He's a good kid.
It all ties back to
It
Alabama.
does,
It's
yeah.
always Alabama or Ohio State. No
Roll
matter
Tide,
what.
baby.
I'm not complaining. I'm just like, but yes, I saw that quote. I saw that drop last night. I'm like, oh boy, poor Archie.
When do and this is just kind of silly sports talk debate, and I don't think anybody talks about it on like ESPN or anything. When do we think we call it quits with that radio host at Green Bay? When do they call it quits? When do they call it quits?
I've asked some people around the league. Not obviously, you can't ask people.
When was their
with the
last win?
league.
I'm gonna go find their last win.
They
lost 19 in a row, I think.
They're too locked in on that.
Including-
They
The
have
only
to be.
It would have to be a mutual parting of ways. I think for that. I don't think he gets
November
fired.
19th.
It's January, almost February.
I'm trying to make sure that's right. November 19th, I believe, is their last win, including a loss to Michigan Tech.
I think it's inexcusable in today's college basketball when you can literally go just reload your roster every year. It's not as if like when people used to when new coaches would come in and take over a program and there was all the limitations of players who transfer and have to sit out a year and you're kind of stuck with what you have. It used to take a few years to build your program. Now it does still take a few years to kind of get healthy and get your guys in and get right. But at the end of the day, I've actually been shocked at a conference like I always talk about the smaller conferences, the MAC, the Horizon. Those conferences, although they're impacted by when they get a good player, they're plucked away. They also pull a lot of players from the Power Four as well, from the higher major programs. These mid-major conferences are actually not as unhealthy as what many would like to think that they are. The Horizon has actually gotten better over the last couple of years because of the transfer portal. Now, these aren't programs. It's basically you're slapping a new roster together every single year. But that's the thing. I'm watching teams all across that conference improve on a year-to-year basis. Green Bay has no excuse. They just went out. He went out and got so many bad players, it seems, that they just can't seem to get it going. There's less patience for coaches right now in college basketball because you could literally put an entire roster together. It's not like football where that's hasn't been able to be, maximized yet. I don't know. I don't give them a lot.
They lost to
leeway.
Youngstown State by 4. Other than that, I mean, these games aren't even close.
No,
I mean, they're getting absolutely dog walked by everyone they play.
Yeah, Gottlieb's time has got to be running out soon. I don't know when, but if they lose out, I mean, what are we talking about? That's one of the worst college basketball seasons of all time. So,
what's his hit rate on hosting the show?
Is
he still hosting it?
I don't know.
Can't be. Right?
There's no way I'd face the music and host a show after losing 19 straight college basketball games. That's crazy.
Nuts.
I do think that you're right, though, about the pressure, because Wes Miller has done a phenomenal job at recruiting. Like, he's brought in talent. He just hasn't been able to win with that talent. And once the fan base knows you have it, they want to see you win with it. It's only natural. It's why and we kind of talked about it yesterday. I don't want to lose Wes because I lose Shanabayev as well. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose Jizzle James. I don't want to lose the guys that we have because I do think there's talent there. But at the same time, it's a double-edged sword because Wes Miller can bring him in here, but he can't coach. Travis Steele, same exact way. So I root for, and I saw Nick Niehaus. He was another host of Chatterbox Bearcats. He's like, I've got a crazy take, but I'm going to cheer for Wes Miller to succeed. And it's like, Nobody wants to see, and I know he was joking when he said it, nobody wants to see Wes Miller fail. We're all cheering for Wes Miller, but when we've seen the games that we've watched this year, it's like there's been so much taking a step back every single time where there's no defense of it anymore. So I hope that he's able to figure out a little bit of a spark down the stretch of this season so I don't lose all hope heading into next year, but it seems unlikely at this point.
All right, off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. A couple more minutes, obviously. By the way, I don't know if you saw this. I don't mean to just break on college basketball. Go back to college football quick. But Dylan Gabriel is down to Oregon, Oklahoma, and UCF. So how about that? He put out those helmets.
Oh yeah, he's wearing all 3 logos at the Senior Bowl.
So, which one is he going with? Like,
I think that's cool. I always like when players do that. Jalen Hurts did it. I know
I confused you there
started
for a
that a couple
second.
weeks ago. Yeah, you did. But he started that a couple years ago with the Alabama and Oklahoma helmet. I love when they do this at the Senior Bowl. I think if you transfer through and you get to a point where you're an NFL prospect and you're going through this stuff and you have a chance to, pay homage to all 3 of the schools or 2 of the schools that you played for, and I think that's pretty cool. I always like when players do that. I think it's nice.
I just love when programs now do like once a Buckeye, always a Buckeye.
Yeah.
Unless you're Tate Martell.
Yeah.
Or unless you're Kyle McCord. Once a Buckeye, always a Buckeye. The first year of Joe Burrow at LSU, no one was saying that. But year 2, my God, Buckeyes were lining up trying to take credit for it all. Like, that's just how that stuff goes. But it does these kids play for so many different teams. I think at some point it just becomes like a list of Browns quarterbacks. It just keeps going on and on and on.
I saw a 6 logo the other day, a transfer graphic with 6 logos, 6 team logos on it. I was like, that math. You only played 4 years.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Anything else before we close out today?
Casey, how's FCC doing? Can we get an FCC report?
Your FC report?
Any press conferences to?
Our boy's back with the team, though.
Yeah,
that's
Lucho's
what matters.
Back.
That's
Lucho's
big.
Back. That's big.
The MVP.
I don't know if we've heard anything about Kubo, but I do think Kubo's returning as well. Everyone's coming back, so that's good. I don't know if relationships.
They won the championship. You got to just run it back.
Huh?
I said they won the championship. You got to just run it back.
Well, last year they won the league, but didn't win the.
Make some changes. Can't be complacent.
So you're
They
telling
did.
me you're
They
telling
got
me
in a big, they got in a big name.
Okay.
you're
Big
telling
name to help out Lucho.
you're telling me this season starts.
Like 2 weeks.
No, it starts tomorrow.
What?
Or it starts Thursday.
Well,
Or
preseason.
is that preseason?
Yeah, I think that's preseason.
Okay.
It's 30 days until actual season.
Thursday,
starts.
January 30th, they play the Houston Dynamo.
Yeah, that's just preseason play.
Okay. So the regular season starts a little bit later.
Gotta get ready.
I see the CONCACAF Champions Cup. They play that February 19th. All right. So we'll see. Good for FC. Maybe we'll have one team win something in this city. But terrible.
Anything else?
I think that's it.
I think that's it. Go Reds. Go Bearcats. Go Bengals. Go.
Any shows to promote
FCC.
coming up?
No shows.
Nothing on the brink unless the Bengals do something. Bengals sign T. Higgins, sign Jamar Chase. You know where to find me.
Yeah, we got to make sure they're not liking any posts on social media.
Yeah.
Anything like that.
Has the Joey Votto tattoo been resolved yet?
I haven't seen any updates on
That disappeared like that post. It's just that story's gone away.
I think everyone's just, we love you, Joey.
When we see Joey Votto next,
we'll
he'll
leave
have
it
no
be.
arm.
Yeah.
He'll have no arm.
Yeah,
He'll just take that arm off.
Yeah, just cut
He's
it
going
off.
to come out throwing the first pitch. He'll wear the basketball sleeve. Just wild.
Oh, what a horrible situation. But all right, until tomorrow, this has been Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers.